Hi, and welcome to Encaptify. I'm Shannon Malkin Daniels, founder and CEO of Encaptive, and I am joined here by my co-host, Keith Reynolds, who is the founder and CEO of Publio. Welcome, Keith.
Thanks for the intro, Shannon. Very excited to be here for today's episode. We're going to take a look at best practices from content and event strategies and bring them to you as we wrap up our 7-part series. Why 7 parts, you ask? You ask Shannon. So we based the Encaptify agenda on my book, The New Content Culture, which presents 7 buckets for a successful content strategy. And our publisher's MO, it's a method, and we call it that because publishers have produced content and built audiences and sold advertising for years, and now we sell all kinds of things using media. So it aligns nicely with strategy and event best practices, which isn't what Encaptive is all about.
That's right, Keith. We utilize industry best practices in human communication research at Encaptive in order to both design our event technology as well as provide strategy and planning for our customers and clients, because events aren't just click the tech and go. You need to have the strategy behind it to make it work for you and to make those events really engaging for your audience so that you can get to your goals and objectives, which is one of the things we're talking about today, ROI. And when you really stop to think about it, thinking about the series as a whole and Encaptify and how it came together, events are a form of content marketing. It's a way to get your brand out there. And Keith's book, your book, Keith, is a fantastic roadmap for audience engagement and success, which really ties what we do at Encaptive and Publio together so well.
It's been wonderful working with you over the years. It's really a yin and yang kind of thing. You've been building this platform, and I've been really working on building the methodology, and here we are working together. So one of the reasons I love working with you and Encaptive is that in addition to live events, your platform can be used as a lead generation and audience conversion tools. There's some really secret sauce kinds of things that under the covers here of your software platform that make it conducive to achieving goals with an audience. And that's really what we're about as a fractional CMO, to help our clients achieve their goals. So generating inbound leads through content events is how we both help our clients.
Absolutely. And that's why it has been such a great collaboration between Encaptive and Publio, because they really go hand in hand with each other, right? You have to have that content strategy there, because like I mentioned, events are a form of content marketing. And it's really why we came together and put this series together and wanted to bring all of that to you, our audience. And we were really lucky to be able to enlist a fantastic lineup of special guest speakers over the past 6 episodes. And we have another fantastic speaker with us here today. I won't do a spoiler alert. Keith's going to be introducing us to him in just a minute. But those speakers have been here to share our knowledge with you and with us. And it's all about content strategy and event strategy best practices and ways to help you really build your network and achieve your goals this fall and into the winter and the new year. And over the past 6 episodes, we've learned how to align your content and event strategy with your North Star idea, something pinnacle to your methodology, Keith, as well as your purpose and your objective for having the event. And most importantly, taking a look at what's relevant to your audience, because at the end of the day, it's all about them, right? You want to attract them, you want to build their interest, you want to engage with them so that you can accomplish your goals. And then after we got through that really important meat at the front end, we delved into how to build community through your events, how to successfully integrate technology into your event experience, whether in person, virtual, or hybrid. Also, how to develop sales and marketing strategies that drive attendance and help you to experience better outcomes, which our guest speaker today is just a master at. So very excited to hear from him.
Well, it's been amazing at what we've been able to attract when we put this idea out there. Amazing presentations. And so if you missed them, every one of them is available here within the Encaptive, where you are watching us right now. You can leave and check out the agenda and watch all the other presentations from this series that we put together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree that it has been an amazing lineup so far. I'm very excited. And for those of you who are on with us today, thank you for being here, and stay tuned because we've gotten such great feedback. Can I give a little spoiler alert, Keith?
You should go ahead, Shannon.
We are already starting to talk about how we start collaborating to extend this series in the new year. So stay tuned for that. If you love it, we want to hear your ideas. We want to hear what you want to hear more of, what you want to learn more about. And because we have just had a fantastic building here over these past 6 episodes into today's, which leads us to our pinnacle today, which is event ROI. And ROI is something that is so incredibly important for events. If we're looking at some of the stats out there, according to Prelude Events, 48% of brands realize an ROI between 3-to-1 to 5-to-1 with their events and experiences. That's a pretty darn good ROI. And 44% of marketers experience a 3-to-1 ROI from event marketing. And then when you're looking at those stats in context, according to Forrester, 12% of marketing budgets are allocated to events. So that just shows how powerful they are and how much ROI you can really achieve from it.
Yeah, that's pretty compelling, Shannon. I mean, that really shows how much events impact an organization and how much they contribute to the bottom line. So we're all the more the reason to dive into this week's episode. But before we do, a few housekeeping items. Everybody is in the room watching us, but you have the ability to chat with each other. You can submit questions to us as well, and we'll try and take them during the presentation, and we'll also get to them in the roundtable portion of this. And so we really want this to be interactive for you guys out there in the audience, guys and gals, and also to be able to connect with each other, because this is also about networking. And I've already heard of stories of people connecting through the last several weeks. So
love that.
Already we're making an impact, and please continue to do so today. Just at the end of this, click the leave session button, and you'll be able to join through the pop-up that you see come before you. And that's when we go from the presentation into the networking portion. We'll be walking you through that as well. And you can join the roundtable then by clicking the join now. Just to the right, you see where you are right now. So 2 ways to get to the next portion of the event.
Yeah.
So I am super excited to introduce Michael Bendit, today's guest. Michael, it's been a pleasure working with you preparing for this. Michael is a real professional. I've known him for probably 7 years. We met through the American Marketing Association. He's a network builder and a management consultant and a business development executive with a passion for building businesses and also for the people and connecting them through the things that he does. And we're going to learn a little bit about his approach to using events and networking in his business. Michael specializes in marketing strategy, information services, pricing, and a broad range of industries, as well as sales in the B2B software development services sector. He's also the founder of the Trusted Referral Network and Software Development Resources, both companies which he owns. Welcome, Michael. We're incredibly honored to have you today.
Thank you. Thank you, Shannon and Keith, for putting together this amazing Incaptify series on content and event strategy. Of course, and your teams as well. There's there are people behind you that are all part of the production, and it's great to be here and present and lead a discussion really about rocketing your event ROI based on my own experience starting and running 2 marketing-focused networking groups.
Great.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
before we jump in, we'll give you the floor. Why don't you just tell our audience all about what you do and a little bit more about who you are? And
absolutely. And I'm going to start by, some of you may be wondering, how does networking relate to ROI? So the way I look at it is I have an ongoing series of weekly meetings. They're essentially virtual events for members and guests to help develop and reinforce business relationships. And these relationships translate into referrals and collaborations, which for me are the source of about 70% of my revenue. So the actual ROI of each event is almost impossible to measure. Really only taken together over a period of time do they help build valuable referral relationships, which are key to my business, and I think key to the business of all of the other members in the group. So I'll first share, I thank you, Keith, for giving a bit of an introduction. I'm going to share my LinkedIn profile first. Some of you may have seen it. And you can see that I do three things, basically. I do software sales or software development sales. So I represent about a dozen teams. I'm an independent consultant, and I'm also an avid networker. And that's really what I'm going to focus on today. I make my living with the first two. I don't yet really make much money directly from the networking, except to say that it generates a significant portion of my revenue. So I've been a consultant for about 20 years. I focus in that world on pricing strategy, mostly for the tech industry. About 12 years ago, I started this sales representation firm for boutique software development teams. I call that Software Development Resources. You could see that here. And a lot of our work in that business comes from the marketing world, since my teams build websites, e-commerce sites, mobile applications, and much of that business comes from ongoing relationships with small digital marketing agencies who rely on my teams as their outsourced development partner. And that leads me to the third leg of my business, and that's my avid networking, which almost entirely is focused on my target market, digital agencies. The idea actually came from my ex-wife, who was a member of BNI. It didn't really work out for her so well. She was selling a fairly expensive service. She was targeting larger companies. BNI tends to work well with smaller companies, but she gave me a little bit of information about, how BNI, what really works in BNI. And one of the things that she told me about was these power groups, which are sort of subgroups within each chapter that revolve around the same industry. So the best examples were the real estate power group. You can imagine they've got the real estate broker, maybe the commercial broker, and the residential broker, and the title person, and the insurance, title insurance, the banker, etc. And the reason is that those subgroups or power groups work so well is that the services were adjacent to each other. So people spoke the same language, and they had a much better understanding of the nuances of each other's offerings. So instead of, joining a BNI, the other problem with BNI is it starts at 7 a.m. I wasn't ready to get up that early, but I figured I'll start my own. I'll create my own power group targeting my target industry, marketing services. And from that, I founded this group called the Marketing Network. It's a small category exclusive network. It's been around for about 10 years, and we meet 2 times a month, 8:30 in the morning instead of 7 on Fridays. And as I mentioned, about 70% of my business today has come from those referrals from that network. So the takeaway from my experience with the Marketing Network is if you're going to invest in creating an event or a series of events or an ongoing network group, you have to be deliberate and thoughtful about your target audience. Make sure that your event appeals to and attracts that target audience so that those who attend remember you as a valuable and knowledgeable resource. And taking it back to this series, right? It's a perfect example of that strategy at work, right? This focus is clearly on events and content, and those topics have tremendous synergies since any good event focuses on specific content that's relevant to the audience and the producers. So Shannon, whose company sells an event management platform, which we'll be using today, and Keith, whose business is all about content marketing strategy. So you can see how those two things come together to reach an audience, which is all of you. Now, I just want to jump ahead from the founding of the marketing network, a small network, to starting the Trusted Referral Network, which is a national version, essentially, of the marketing network. And I guess I figured, since, software development services, my core business, can be delivered from almost anywhere, I realized that I could expand my network nationally to reach a larger number of clients and potential digital marketing partners. So I started the Trusted Referral Network in 2020, just before the start of the pandemic, to bring that marketing network concept national. And we now have about 180 members, as you can see from here. We also have a couple of sponsors. We have 28 different categories of marketing services represented. And the key components of the network are this directory website. You could jump and see this is Keith's. Keith is a member. This is Keith's page, Publio. We also have weekly meetings. So let me jump to that. Those alternate weekly between Wednesday mornings and Tuesday afternoons. We have a Slack channel. We have another thing called Meeting Machine, which is a private lunch club, in essence, if you're familiar with Lunch Club. And so there's a few different aspects. It's not all at the meetings. There's other things that help keep this group together. And the reason that we have the meetings on Tuesdays and Wednesdays is because sometimes somebody might have a standing meeting at the time and it would conflict. So I wanted to give two options. Also, it's important, if you have a national group, to be able to cover the time zones, right? And we start at 11 on Wednesdays, 11 a.m. That's 8 a.m., which is still a reasonable hour on the West Coast. And Tuesdays, it's 5 p.m., so 2 p.m. on the West Coast. We usually have about 10 to 20 members and guests at every meeting. And we start with a mini event, right? We start with a showcase from one of our members, so the other attendees can get a deeper understanding of their services. And then we do typical networking. We do a round robin, 2 to 3 minute introductions, depending on how many people are in attendance. And then during those introductions, I really encourage people to think about how they can assist each of the other attendees, and also who they want to meet with one-on-one afterwards, independently, where they can really learn about the other members. So the whole thing is about building those relationships, but it starts with the attendance. And I would say that is true for all sorts of events. The event brings people together, gives them the opportunity to connect, but it's the follow-up that really makes the difference. So as I mentioned earlier, calculating the ROI, it's very important to have a really good sense of what that is, but there's some subjectivity to it, right? You can certainly talk about what it cost you to put that on, but you also need to think about the time involved with the people who are, allocating their time to this. And then the return is typically a much longer return. There may be a short-term return in terms of any fees you charge, but ultimately the big return is on the revenue generated. So I'll open it up to questions. Keith, did you want to go to a panel session?
Yeah, well, let's bring myself and Shannon back on. We've had a couple questions come in, and some of them you've explained here very succinctly, like how you stay in touch with people, the importance of that, how that over time builds up almost an innate understanding of the ROI. And as you scale and work in larger organizations, as all three of us have, you become more process oriented, but you're able to manage that today through technology. You showed us your website and the back end of how you connect people and how that integrates then into the events with the meeting. So it's really, I think one of the cool things today is we all have access to technologies that used to only be available for big companies. So tell us a little bit about, let's see, Oh, here's one. If you were to implement one change going forward to measure your ROI, would you do?
I could probably do a better job of tracking referrals, not just for myself, of course, but for all the members. So it is something that's on my roadmap for one thing actually that BNI does quite well, mostly on paper, but tracking referrals because people do want to see how effective your networking really is. They build those relationships; those are certainly important, but understanding how that translates into closed business, which is ultimately why people do business networking. So that's one thing where I think I would like to invest in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just like to throw in there that when we're looking at a lot of statistics, over 86% of event marketers said that attendee satisfaction is their best gauge on event success. And so I've heard people in the industry say it's not just about ROI and dollars and cents. They use something called ROR, return on relationships, right? And what kind of connections are you making? What kind of relationships are you building? Because they know that once you nurture those relationships, events are doing two things. They're building brand recognition. They're doing multiple things, but a few things I'll hit on: building brand recognition. They're also showing and elevating you as an expert in your field and as someone who cares and really wants to help others. And you're providing them with content and information that's valuable for them. But it also, like I said, that return on relationship starts to build those relationships, which can be a lot of times hard to measure. And that's what you're talking about with the type of group that you have, that there are some measurements you can put in place, but it's really important to understand, like, what are those measurements and how do I measure those? And it's not always in dollars and cents, right?
Yeah, I mean, most people that I network with and who've told me about their experience, a positive experience about networking, is not only building those relationships, but ultimately they say, I closed a deal that was a referral, and it definitely more than paid for my time in showing up and being part of this group and whatever fees they pay.
Right.
Most of the people that I network with are in the B2B world, so they tend to be fairly high ticket items. Mm-hmm. And in the B2B world, where you're providing a service, in most cases, it's those relationships that are so critical, because people do business with people they know, like, and trust. And you can't get to know, like, and trust somebody until you spend time with them and get to know them.
Yeah.
And so really a big value in the B2B world, which is the lion's share of business in the economy, right, is having those relationships. And that's why the events are so important. And just imagine how we all made the transition to virtual and hybrid events, and we're still having to look at the way that we measure value, right? Do I spend my time there? How much time are we investing in those events, right? Because there's a dollar cost to that as well.
Yeah.
One of the things that I always bring to the party when I talk to people about building an audience and getting a return on that is the expense to revenue metric, right? And it's kind of it's a good back of the napkin look at my expenses for putting on the events and look at the incremental revenues that I can get by channel. But many businesses get 80% of their new revenue from being out there meeting with people. So that E to R, am I spending $1 to get $3 back? Have you ever run into metrics like that in your career?
Absolutely. I spent many years as a consultant. I still do some consulting work. Pricing is one of my areas of expertise. And so, there's a lot of analytics involved in that. And clearly, if you are charging for an event, there's the immediate return on investment that I mentioned. You may have sponsors that generate revenue for you. Smaller events where it's more like networking, which is what I do. I don't yet charge for my trusted referral network, but that's coming down the road as I upgrade my platform. I don't think that will be the primary, return on investment because I still think that it's being the leader of this group gives me a tremendous amount of exposure, first of all, but also all of the other members. I mean, I get more exposure. I put in a lot of time, of course. I may get, I certainly get a lot of business from it. But I think that the balance also works for other people. They don't put in as much time. Maybe they don't get quite as much business since they're not the one leading all of the meetings. But it's how much effort they put in getting to know other people. And in each of those meetings deciding, okay, I want to talk to Shannon or Keith or whomever afterwards, so I can really get to know what they do and see if there's opportunities for us to collaborate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're not going to get back out if you're not putting in and contributing, right? I was talking to someone about this very thing this morning about being part of networking groups and just groups in general. If you're just kind of sitting on the sidelines and going, hey, and waiting, right, it's not going to come back to you. And you made a good point about the difference between, the smaller, more localized or even just virtual networking groups that may be larger ones too, versus a big conference or event. Like I just am coming out of helping to plan and organize a gala where there were some very clear goals around what we wanted to accomplish. What was our return on investment? So we had a whole spreadsheet created of here's all of our expenses, here's our goals for, our return on this investment, what we can raise for this nonprofit to help them be successful going into the new year, et cetera, et cetera. I'm planning another conference that's happening in March, and we have the same thing. We sit down, we create budgets, we line item it out, we anticipate what our expenses are going to be for the event, and then you have to build that into your ticketing prices. Or if you're a networking group that's going to start charging, you have to look at what are the costs of my technology. Like we do have networking groups that use Captive for their weekly meetings, and then they take the platform and use it for their biannual conferences that they do. They do a spring and a fall conference every year. So they have to factor in the cost of the technologies that they're using between Captive and other things, the marketing resources that they're using, the book publishers that they're using because they do anthologies, right? What are all those expenses? And this is what it's going to cost to be a part of this group if you want access to all of these resources, right? So even whether it's a big conference or event, or you're running a regular group that you're trying to move into a paid type of thing, there has to be that budget and expense aspect to it, which I'm sure you being as successful as you are as a businessman, and you've mentioned that a big portion of your business comes from that referral network. I'm sure you've thought about that. Can you talk a little bit more about how you look at budget and expense in terms of ROI?
Yeah. So some things are very easy to measure, right? You can measure, if you're spending directly on an event and what you're getting out of that. Some things that are harder to measure on the budgeting expense time is on the budgeting expense line is the time associated with, putting that event together. It does take a fair amount of time. You may have people that are dedicated to it in a larger organization that are, dedicated to put in the marketing department, typically events it's a lot of money, but and then if it's dedicated people, you can take their salary and their overhead associated with that. Sometimes it's difficult to break it out and say, geez, how much time do they spend on each of these 10 or 20 events that we have during the year? But yeah, there's at least some tangible figures that you can build up on the expense side, much easier than on the revenue side, except in the good example that you raised, which is a fundraising event, right? Usually it's those fundraising events are intended specifically by the name to raise money. And if it's not a big return relative to the cost, it's a bust. Mm-hmm. And I've certainly been involved in some of those. But as you pointed out as well, even there, it's all about the content and the relationship building, right? You want to get people, you're not only selling seats, oftentimes you're also having an auction. You want people to feel like they're a part of that association, the organization. So, and how much they're appreciated, because that helps open up their wallets and support the organization.
Well,
Yeah, and it all comes back to what you were talking about in the beginning, which is relationships. And a lot of times when I'm giving workshops, especially on public speaking or how to use public speaking in events to grow your business, I'll ask people in the audience, show of hands, how many of you in this room have spent more money on a product or service because it was coming from someone you knew and trusted? And without a doubt, 100% of people raise their hands in the room every single time.
yeah.
Right. And I know we're coming up on time here, but I think we wanted to see, Greg submitted a couple of great questions. I think we want to get one of his questions in, right, Keith?
Yeah, that's exactly what we want to do. So, what we've talked about is a wide range of applications, and within the putting an event together, there's all the things you do to create the environment, and that where people can network, they learn. There's the magic that happens to make the event really click with the audience, and then there's the ROI side of this. And one of the key elements of ROI is follow-up. We got a question from Greg. What are your thoughts on making the event work after the event?
So I look at it from two different perspectives. One, as the organizer of the event. So I put out a newsletter every week, which recaps the prior meeting. The presenter, I record it and put it up on YouTube. So we have a YouTube channel so that people can go back, or people that missed it can see the event. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I really encourage people to figure out who they want to connect with one-on-one. And make it at least one or two people, because it's like, if you're a participant and you go to an event, a live event, and you collect a bunch of business cards, if you don't follow up, you may have a stack that's pretty big, and you may not be able to go through all of them. Some of those you might have, collected because you were being polite, but there should be, 10%, 20% of those that might be really good contacts, and follow up. Give them a call, send them an email. If you can invite them to something else to show them that, you've been thinking about what might be good for them, that's a great way to start building that relationship. You've met once, you had a good conversation, you got to take it to the next level.
Well, that's really where the rubber meets the road. That's why we involve CRM and marketing automation technologies to really enable us to talk to more people more efficiently in less time, right? Yeah. And so all of that follow-up becomes really important. This is a great time to segue, I think, over to the networking and discussion portion of this.
Yeah. And I just have one point to that as well with all the automation stuff. One of the things that we've built into the Incaptive platform is we know how hard it is to collect all these business cards and try to remember everybody and what they do and who they are and the follow-up. So we've actually, on the people page, if you go over there, you can add people. You can click a star to add them to my contacts, and then just filter down to your contacts. And then you can contact them directly through the platform. You can DM them just like you can in LinkedIn or Facebook. And every time you log in, you can see if you have a new DM from someone and communicate with them. And so we've tried to make it a little easier for the follow-up post events and that. But to Keith's point, thank you so much, Michael. We are going to move over to the roundtable discussion. And so we'll have you head over to that room. But for the rest of the audience, if you can just stay here for a moment, let's all give Michael a round of applause. Thank you, Michael, for being here, for sharing that with us. But we're looking forward to continuing the conversation over in the roundtable with you. So I'm going to let you head on over there, and we'll see you over there and continue the conversation.
Absolutely.
Michael, thank you so much.
All right, now for the rest of you, stick with us for just a minute, because we've got a couple of housekeeping items before we head over to that roundtable room. First of all, we have a $50 Amazon gift card giveaway for those of you who have stayed with us for at least 3 Incaptify episodes. Please, if you haven't already, head over to the lobby after the event is over today. Click the button in the lobby to fill out the survey, and then we will be drawing after this week's event segment one winner who has attended at least 3 episodes and has filled out that survey for us. And you will win a $50 Amazon gift card. Thanks for your thanks and attending and being part of this.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, Keith, anything to add as before I do some final housekeeping here?
Yeah, it seems like we have a lot of work to run a group that often, and it must be successful. So I'm looking forward to finding out, about some of the dues structure and other things. We have questions coming in about in building and managing a network like you do, Michael. So I'm let's
yeah,
move
so so I'll walk people through how to move to the roundtable then. So let's do that so we can get people over there. So I'm going to put up on my screen. What you're going to do is you should see us streaming in that left-hand side where you see Dr. King in this picture. And then you see under the info tab, there's a join now button, or in the upper right-hand corner, there's a leave session button. You can click either one of those buttons. And if you click leave session, you'll get a little pop-up with the roundtable. Just click the join now button, or you can click the join now button from right there, and we will see you over in the roundtable room. We will continue answering your questions, and you'll be able to talk directly with Michael. So thank you very much for joining us today for the 7th episode of Encaptify, and stay tuned because there's more good nuggets coming at you.
Absolutely. And if you want help putting on an event like this for your business, give us a call.
Absolutely. All right. We'll see you in the roundtable.
Cheers.